Hélène Arianoff, welcome to Inside the Manege.
Thank you very much, Maria, and happy to meet you.
Same here. And so here we are in Belgium, where you're from and where you're living. And for people who may not know you or your work yet, you've been riding classically and training and teaching now for over 40 years. And you are also a longtime student of Nuno Oliveira. And from what I've seen, you stayed really, really close to the principles that he taught you and to pass those on to your students. So as you've been working for all of these years, what do you aim to achieve and do in the work that you do?
What I would like to achieve, it's okay. I hope that I will have still some years to share my passion with my pupils, my riders, who become friends. Because what I receive from what Nuno taught me, what he gave me, I would like to give to the people who want to work with me, because it's a great experience. And the moment that I was so happy, I would like that the riders have the same happiness that I have. So I want to share.
What do you think was it that makes you so happy about this kind of work in comparison to a different kind of riding, for example?
You know, it's the small moment when everything seems so easy, because your moment that you are with your horse on the same tension, the same feeling, and to reach that, I think it's something you can't explain. In fact, you can't explain, because it's in your body. If you are sensitive, of course, it touches you more than somebody else. But it's really too difficult for me. It's joy through all my body, because sometimes it's just for some second, you know. But perhaps I will use a word, but sometimes you feel a centaur.
Yeah, like a centaur.
Yes, and I hope that all the riders will feel that one day.
I think this is something that every rider is really searching for, is this feeling of unity with the horse.
Yeah.
This sense that you are one with the horse like a centaur. And at least for me, I've found that much more after finding classical riding. And I can only imagine what it was like for you riding with Nuno and being able to learn and slowly learn how to have more and more of those moments. And so I can only imagine what a joy it is to be able to then share that with other people.
Yes, that's a passion. In fact, you can't explain. I don't know, it's happened one day like that. And but Nuno helped me a lot, because from the beginning he tried to explain. In the beginning he was really, really nicer than later, because he asked more and more, so it was more and more difficult. But I think that he did the job. He did the job, as I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for that. So but for me it's very difficult to speak about Nuno Oliveira, because I'm always say it's my secret garden. I can't explain. It's something happened. I'm very grateful, and that's it.
I think it's a very special opportunity that you had. And I feel like on the one hand, it's what you absorb from him and the way of doing everything. But also I think part of it is the knowledge as well behind it, of how to bring yourself and the horse to those moments where you really feel like in harmony and one. And now you have so much experience going all around the world, traveling. You've taught not only in Belgium, but also in France and Italy and Switzerland, in Canada, and also Ukraine and Russia now.
And Russia. Canada, it's more, I would say more Quebec, because I'm not so well in English. So I'll try to do my best. But I think that if I need to give a lesson, I will speak more fluently to give the lesson than to speak about me, about life or something like that.
I've seen you explain things.
Sorry, huh?
No, you explain things very, very well. When you're teaching, you're really in your element. And so after, so much experience teaching around the world, what do you think are some of the common misunderstandings that you find riders always have?
Everywhere the same misunderstanding. They don't, in fact, I think it's because of the training. There's one word that I never use, is to push. I don't push with my feet. I don't push with my legs. And it's a common word, push. Push, it means make the horse going. That's more the expression, but it's not to push or to fix very tight your legs on the horse. It just and there is some, for instance, also when they say impulsion, a lot of riders, riders that I meet like that, what they use. Impulsion is go fast. Mm-hmm. That's a really big difference to explain that impulsion, it's really propulsion from the hindquarters, and so that in the beginning it's quite easy when you don't know people to fix them the rules. In fact, rules that they can use one day naturally.
So that impulsion doesn't mean to go fast, but it means the energy of the hindquarters.
It doesn't mean to go fast. Impulsion, it's the way, for me, it's the way the horse is going forward. That's one. But after, I think I make a difference in impulsion and propulsion. When we speak about the propulsion, it's something, we ask a little more the horse to be in a better balance, to really to propulse. For me, it's a bit different.
Why do you think so many people have this misunderstanding and think that to have impulsion means to push? How do you think they came to this sort of idea?
Perhaps I think that there is a lot of young trainers. And they train because they ride and they help, and so they are not enough trained themselves to explain really what is it. I think that for the moment, all over the world, I think it's a lackness of good instructor or good instructor, the young instructor. I think that's it's a big lackness.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are a few people who have the same amount of experience as you at this point in time, but I wanted to ask for this episode because when I've seen you teach, you explain things so well. I love watching you teach. You bring so much energy to when you're teaching, and when you're helping someone, you really stay on a point until they get what you're trying to help them with.
Yeah.
And I would love for this episode to go into the aids especially. We were talking about this yesterday, and you mentioned that before you can even give the aids, actually what's most important is the rider needs to be able to be positioned correctly on the horse to give the aids correctly.
That's very, very important. Very important. But when I was young, we make a lot of things without spurs. Without stirrups, and we need to feel how to sit deeply in the saddle with long legs, really relax. And those things nobody are doing now. They put on the horse rising trot. Even they don't explain how to make a good rising trot, and I think that all the basic things they need to fix more, to take time, but everybody's in hurry. For the moment, that's life. They have to receive however, the way they receive. It just go fast, fast, fast. We call that's the period of the microwave. They put something in the microwave, they push on the button, and 2 minutes after, everything is there. And I think it's a little bit the position of the riders now. They're impatient. That's we call them microwave. So, period. I'm sorry, but it's something like that.
So how would you describe the correct position?
You know, I will say it's, okay, when you have a rider, you need to watch the rider and to see where is the most, where they are not sit, is there is a lackness of the body, the top of the body is the lackness of the upper, how you say, the legs, the legs from the waist. So it depends the rider. You need also to know, okay, if the rider has long legs, you need to work with, first of all, the long legs, and after work with the back. Depends the physique of the rider. But you need to sit. And when I'm used, sometimes I ask the rider to put the shoulders up, really high, and after drop them down. So the moment they drop down, the spine still go up. So the spine go up, but all the parts of the body are going down. So you begin to be, by that position, you begin to be into the saddle. I like the word into the saddle. Sometimes I use that even in French. I say, in English, we say into the saddle. So it means really you go through the saddle. In fact, you are deep, you are not heavy, you are deep. And by the deepness, you go with your thighs down. And after you shoe your stirrups, but on the third part, the ball of the larger part of your foot, and you fix your feet like that on the stirrups. And you don't forget to breathe. That's very important. But so that's some exercises I practice when I see that there is something that the rider should be straight. And he can, as we talked about that, the shoulder blades could be on the back of a high chair, on the high back of the chair. So he can lay down, but he can't push. So he's against the top of the chair, but if he need to resist, he can't go more back, and if that's the moment that he use the bascule of the pelvis to stay straight.
The tilt of the pelvis a little bit forward.
Yes, and the pelvis. And in fact, to have that, sometimes I make the exercise when the rider is on the horse. I put one forearm on the back, on the really back, on the kidneys, and I'm pushing my forearm against the kidneys. I'm relaxed, but I'm pushing, so I have the bascule of the pelvis. Or also on the chair, I'm not that I try. May I try to explain? So you do this, in fact, and you stay like that. You sit at the beginning of the chair, and you are moving. You try to move, but this is heavy. So you begin on a plastic chair, and you try to put the back of the up, and you come back, and you use yes, but it's difficult because they are very heavy. In the beginning, you sit really on the top. Try, and you do this. You see, like this.
Yeah.
And I practice.
And why is it so important to develop this in the pelvis.
So
Why is it so important to develop this in the
because
pelvis?
you need to develop that, because when you need to resist, for instance, a horse is pulling on the shoulders, going on the shoulders, immediately you have to bring the withers high. But bringing the withers high, you need to, I like the word, to grab with the seat bones. You grab and you put your belly button, your waist, but from the belly button up, and you bring the withers higher. It's to practice. Just I try always to find some exercises to supple to help the rider to be more supple, because the suppleness of the waist is very important, as well the suppleness of the wrists and the suppleness of the ankles.
Okay. I want to go through the aids carefully to all of these different points. I think what you're saying ties in really well with, there's a really beautiful quote by Nuno where he says to take your reins like a flower and not like a stone, to take your horse by your waist and by your seat, not by your hand and never by force. If you do it by force, it's not the art of riding, it's something else. So you've already started talking about it, but what do you think he means by to take the horse by your waist and by your seat?
That's the bascule of the pelvis.
Just the tilting underneath?
Yes, like this. And you envelope, in fact, you envelope with your legs. You envelope. So if you need sometimes to envelope a little bit more, you envelope a little bit more with your thighs. But just the moment you bascule the pelvis, you can close a little bit your thighs to help the horse, to bring the horse more under your knees, and after you relax again. But relax, it doesn't mean that you lose the horse from your thighs. You need always to feel the horse through the thighs.
So what are the different ways that you can use, for example, your waist, like you're saying, and your back? So you're talking about the bascule is when you round your lower back a bit and tilt the pelvis forward. So how do you use this in different circumstances to influence the horse differently?
You know, it's the problem that sometimes we begin to do that naturally and we don't think. And sometimes it's difficult to, I speak frankly, it's difficult to explain that, because it depends. When you teach a rider, you can say, now do that, because you see. But really, just to explain, when it depends the rider you have in front of you.
Well, let's take an example. So let's say you have a horse that's very on the shoulders.
Yeah.
And very heavy on the forehand. Then what would you say to the rider to help the horse?
Okay, it means if he's on the shoulders, it means that he doesn't want to go forward. That's so. For that, I will put my hands, heavy hands, keeping my elbows down. I will begin to move my hands up. But I will move my hands from my fingers. You see, I'm doing this, and in the same time, I begin to put my abdomen muscles forward to help the withers to go higher. But the moment I'm doing this, I can't pull my hands up. I bring them on a very soft way. I bring them like this, but immediately something happened there. It's you know, when I'm doing this, I know what it's instinctively I'm doing. But it is, if I can say, it's something. It's become very naturally, but. That's what we need to train the rider. The moment say, they do this. And after, because when you see the horse is going on the shoulders, you find the right moment to do the right action.
It looks like, for what you were explaining, though, that it's like when you're talking about raising the hands a little bit, that it comes actually from your seat. It comes from what you're doing with your waist to push it forward.
That's how I use always to grab. I like the way to grab. You have to do, how to say that, you need to do that all together in the same moment. But how much, you can't tell the rider how much. You can say it's not enough or it's too much. But to find the right action, it's learning. We teach that little by little to make the rider more sensible in his riding.
More sensitive.
Yeah, more sensitive. It takes a long time. It takes a long time to. I know. I don't know how many years I spent to try to get that. And one day, it's funny because one day you feel that you've got, and when you have that, it's forever. It's one day you feel, okay, now I can do this. I remember when I was young, it was a girl younger than me. She has a really nice position. I was always looking at her, and she was like that, really. And by mimetism,
like copying her.
Yeah, I said, and one day, it's funny. I will remember that. I thought that I was her. I came in her body, and is that? But to improve, that's also the big difference. That when we want to improve, we need to be around people who they have a nice position. Because if you have a nice position, you ride among that kind of rider, you will be exactly the same. But when you have riders who are doing this, that, it's really hard.
Yeah, I think having these really good examples, it changes a lot. Because then we were also talking about this yesterday, you have this like inner picture of what you have seen, say a good rider. And then you carry that with you when you ride, and it influences you.
Yeah, of course. That's what I say. It's by mimetism, you can improve watching the good video, for instance, and don't look what you want to do. If you feel that that's not your type of riding, stop looking. No way, because you don't agree. So no way to go on to watch something that you don't like.
Yeah.
That's what's happened with me when I see some. It's not nice what I'm going to say, but when I see, when in competition, high-level competition, I see one rider, I say, no, this one I don't want to. I don't want to watch. So I'm waiting for the next one. Because no way. They are riding, okay, they are perhaps in the top, but it's not because they are in the top that they are. That's a competition. That's nothing to do with what we try to teach or to train the way we want.
And what are the differences that you see, or what do you see in competition?
Okay, when you make competition, first of all, when you go to competition, it's you would like to win. Competition is that. So you ask more and more to your horse, and one moment the horse is fed up for that. And when he's fed up, we fix a little bit more this, we tighten more the nose band with this and that, more spurs. And unfortunately, we see a lot of that. We sacrifice for what is the competition now. And the competition is not a good example for young riders.
Now that you've been active, in equestrian life for a very long time, so you've had a chance to see this over a very long time. How have you seen riding in competitions or the judging change over time, if it has?
The breeding for dressage horses are improved a lot. And the riders, they are thinking that because the natural gaits are better and the horses nicer and things like that, they think that they can go faster. And they
Faster
can't
in what
faster
way?
means that, for instance, now we see horses 9 years old. It's common that 9 years old they are in the Grand Prix. It's impossible because a horse is adult when he's 8, 9 years. So if you ride on the top, already on the top, somewhere the physique of the horse can't go for a long time. That's for me. Depends if you don't go every month to go to. I speak about high level competition. If you pay attention to keep your horse fresh, you don't go everywhere. That's okay. But there are some riders running everywhere all over the world to make competition, but I think that they go too fast. They go too fast, and they think about, oh, I bought a nice-looking horse with very nice gaits, but a young horse, say a young horse in the skeleton, for me that's a big problem.
Yesterday you mentioned also some things you were seeing, like in the Piaffe, that sometimes it advances forward.
The Piaffe.
Or yeah,
The Piaffe. That's something awful. What's happened now? Because when I was riding in the Grand Prix, we can't move one step forward. We have to be in the Piaffe with softer reins. I don't say longer, I say softer reins, and the horse, he wasn't look like a puppet on a string. Now it's like that. You keep the horse. You don't let him go with your hands. When you have too much hands, you don't have enough seat. That's the question. Too much hands, you are losing seat. So they control like that, and they kick and they kick and they kick with the spurs. And the poor horse is doing nothing. Expect now we have a Belgian rider, fantastic. He's a really nice softness and everything. That's something that that's perhaps it's an opening in another world for dressage competition, and I hope so. But the problem that when we make Piaffe, if we go one step forward, we are losing some points.
back
Now,
in the day.
yeah, and now they let the horse they can make 1 meter for 15 tempo. They allow them to go forward. It's not Piaffe. Piaffe is on the same place with softness. We don't have that. So for me, when you speak about Piaffe, I say no. They are teaching what they show that they are teaching the Piaffe, but by force, because they forget about the collection. There is no more collection. They are not making when they make the trot, the exercises on the trot. It's not collected. It's working trot. There are no more collection. Look, the extended trot. The extended trot, the real extended trot, it's coming from the collected trot. There is no more that. They train the horses to move the front legs, just the front legs. It is not coming from the shoulder. It's coming like that, and they are stiff, and strong. So no way for the quarters to propulse the horse. So the quarters are following the forehand, and completely bent, and they are. I think that they are really strong muscles in the arms to control like that. I'm sorry, I speak frankly. Competition has nothing to do with the classical riding.
Related to the extended trot as well, we were even talking yesterday that it looks sometimes quite a lot like Spanish trot, just because the front legs are so high, and that you lose the diagonal pairs of the hind leg and the front leg.
Yes, Then very often they put in red what is not good, and of course it's exactly that. And I'm sure that they use more things than you can imagine to make the horse going like that with some tip. And and I don't know now. I really don't know why they're buying now for dressage horses. They are buying horses if they have a nice trot. Mm. And in fact, the trot is the only gait that you can improve, that you can change and improve by a horse for the walk and for the canter. And not for the trot. Trot is not a natural gait, so you can change the trot.
Well, even in the walk, like we were saying yesterday, is sometimes even in high-level competition, you've seen horses amble a little bit. Why do you think what causes them to amble in your experience from the training?
Because they don't collect. They shorten the strides with the hands. The back of the horse is not working anymore, so there is no connection from the hindquarters to the forehand. That's not only that. They shorten the stride. They don't collect. They shorten from the front, and they put the nose very near the
chest.
Yes, the chest. It's very easy to see that.
So I think this is very interesting. If we go back to the aids now, you were saying you use too much hand, for example, in collection in the Piaffe, because you don't use enough seat. And I think legs. And I think this is something that has confused a lot of people. If I look at previous episodes, for example, usually people will say, okay, well, if I don't use the hands and the legs to push from the front and from behind, then how do I collect the horse? So how do you actually use all of your aids, the seat, the legs, the hands?
If I want to collect and to bring the horse more, I would say more together and begin to have a collect horse, the best exercise is the shouldering for me, if it's done with proper aids, and not shouldering who looks like an exit.
And why is shouldering so key?
It's really difficult. Shouldering, everybody use the shouldering, but I remember Nuno told me, Hélène, it's the most difficult exercise. Because you need to move the shoulders, okay? But you need to move the shoulders depending the hindquarters. If you have stiff hindquarters, you need to move a little bit more until you feel that you could lose the straightness of the hindquarters. Understand? And if you have a horse who is really, you move a little bit and they are moving too much, you ask less.
So with the angle,
the angle of the move, yes. And everybody say, "Oh, I need to do this." And the most what I see a lot, they move the forehand through the neck, and not from the outside shoulder blade.
What does that mean?
You need to envelope all the shoulder blade outside, and moving from you have to move and at the larger part of the shoulder down, and when you move the larger part, you move the outside front leg. It should come from the shoulder blade and the outside front leg. And what I say always to my riders, and when you move the outside front leg, say to the inside front leg, "Hey, move away. That's my place." But it depends on much regarding the flexibility of the hindquarters. It depends. And when you move, because when you move with the outside rein, you move with your hand, not with your fingers. and you use your fingers. In the same time, you move a little bit the shoulder rein. You pinch the rein with your fingers to oblige the horse to go deeper with the outside hindquarter into the ground. So the horse sits more and engage more the inside hindquarter. And in fact, the inside rein, if I need to go to end the exercise, the inside leg receive the bending of the shoulders, but in the same time, that inside leg doesn't allow the outside hindquarters to move inside. If you move the shoulders, the quarters will go like this. But they still go like that.
Yeah.
Sit and engage. But engage because you seek the horse. Because very often I hear, yes, but the inside leg I'll give more impulsion. If you do that, and I ask, the people say, we push with the inside leg. You don't push. We need to control both legs together. Because the outside leg helps the work of the inside rein, and the inside hindquarter. If you can control the inside, that will give you the bending on the inside rein. Mm. And what you need to also to pay attention is when you make the shoulder in to keep two parallel forehands, because you need to control the shoulders between your hands, but it's more between your the forehands. When you do this, and you move also your shoulders, but you don't turn your belly button. Your belly button should look at the end of the long side where you want to go. So it's really difficult. I remember Nuno told me one day, he told me, Hélène, if you are able to make a real nice circle in a real shoulder in, you are able to do all the exercises you want. And believe me, it's really hard.
It's a core exercise, and I think it's very easy also to just say that you're doing shoulder in without really paying attention to these small details.
Yeah.
And it's usually in the details that actually it really counts.
Now, of course, one moment it's full of details. You improve by details.
And I thought it was super interesting talking about the angle, because I think a lot of, especially competitive riders, say shoulder in is defined by it being on 3 tracks.
Yeah,
and so there's no change in the angle. But it can be super useful to change this angle depending on what the horse needs.
Of course, that's the beginning. That's the beginning. Shoulder in depends how when you move the shoulders, how the horse can control, or you can control the quarters of the horse. And it's funny because very often I ask the rider, how do you use your legs? One and after the other. I say, no. The shoulder in, you need to use both legs together to control the quarters. And in the half pass, just I speak about that, in the half pass, we use one leg after the other, not both legs together.
So let's say, okay, so you've done the work doing shoulder in to collect the horse a little bit. Let's say you're a rider and you want to do Piaffe, but not push the horse and compress it between the legs and the hands. So you've done the shoulder in, you're coming to the Piaffe. How do you use your seat and all of your aids in order to collect the horse?
But we should know that the Piaffe is the top exercise for a rider. So when we say it's the most impulsion on the same spot. But we need, and to practice engagement of the hindquarters and control the balance. To engage, we use the seat bones, we bascule, and to control the movement on same spot, we need to use the top of the top. So from the waist, the top of the body for the balance, and just from the waist down, it's to engage. But to practice that, I was trained to do that exercise. First I go back, I make the horse going back, and after immediately from the last rein back, I go forward. I'm doing that five times forward, 5 times back. After three times, and after 2 times, go back, 1, 2, forward, 1, 2, back. So I supple my body, and I make the horse more lively. When you go back, forward, and a certain moment, soft hands, I resist more in my fingers. I build enough impulsion, and I control that with my seat, and sometimes soft hands outside rein, just to be sure that the horse stay on the hindquarters. And but you need to fix, first of all, you in fact, the Piaffe, that you control the impulsion on the spot by playing with this and that.
Which is, so for people who are listening to the audio only, you're pointing to your low back and with your shoulders.
Yes, and that. But to be supple, you ask the rider 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, forward, back, and the horse is doing this, that, and again. That's one way. But there's a lot of ways to ask the Piaffe. You know, sometimes I ask the Piaffe from the half pass, as Nuno used that also. Or sometimes with the horse who is not enough impulsion, I make a nice half pass. For instance, I take center line, half pass, and when I reach the outside track, I ask 2, 3 steps of that trot on the same spot, softly, and I go again to the trot. It depends. For the Piaffe, we need to know if the horse is rushing or if the horse is lazy. And from that, we can find some exercises to help the horse to be more lively or to be in a better balance.
So if the horse is lazy, then what do you do with your aids?
If the horse is lazy, perhaps I will trot. If the horse is lazy, I will trot and stop, rein back, trot again. You see, to make the horse more lively. And little by little, I will reduce that. Or, what I told you, I'm going to make a half pass. Because in the half pass, you have the tempo, pam, 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 pam. You reach the long side, you are pam, 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 and again push forward. There is one video that you saw perhaps on YouTube, no? I will show you later.
What if you have a horse that's over-energetic? Then how do you use your aids to help them to come into the Piaffe in a nice way?
I will, to energy, I will, if I have too much energy, I won't try to make on the spot. I will work slowly at walk, slowly, 4 steps, 4 equal 4 steps, and just with my seat, just ask softer to see if you're responsive.
And you're slowly tilting your pelvis forward?
I go deeper, but it's always go with your seat, resist on the shoulders. But don't resist by pulling. You resist, in fact, your back. You resist with your back, but your back is strong thanks to your abdominal muscles.
And one thing we were also talking about yesterday, just to avoid any confusion, is some riders, and I also used to do this, is they push with their seat in the Piaffe to try and push the horse into the move. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So how do you do this properly and avoid doing this?
But if I see a rider doing that, I will say, sorry, forget about the Piaffe, no, canter, play with her and come back after. That's the first thing. And after, perhaps I will try to come to help a little bit with the stick, but just not to beat him, nothing, but that, or I will put my stick on the I will touch very lightly to see if the horse is responsive to that. And little by little, when he's doing something, I reward, walk, and come back. You see, because the horse can't use his anxiety, we say
Anxiety,
that, to make that kind of exercise. Otherwise, it will stay for all his life.
And what about the rider? What would you say to the rider to be able to use the seat without pushing, but using the seat to collect and to scoop from underneath?
That should be, but you need, sometimes you need to take time to explain. Or when I drive to Piaffe with that kind of rider, I say, stay, and I begin to work on hands. I let the rider sit, and I begin to touch a little bit. You work on hand. That until the horse will give me some steps that the rider could feel what is exactly the feeling, and after little by little, it takes time. I think there is not really rules. Yes, the rules are that the rider should know exactly that you need to push, you need to engage by using the seat bones. As I say, I like the word to grab. And when you grab, you bring your belly button forward and up. And when you do this, you can feel that you begin to have a strong back, but soft hands. Soft, it doesn't mean that you can't do anything. It's not that. Soft, do something. Try to find the right action. Soft, but one action, because Nuno says always, the less you do, the more is it. The best is it. Okay, when the horse is trained, but in the beginning you need to help him. But the problem is that the rider is always too strong with your hand, with his hands. That's the problem.
And how do you help riders solve this problem how do you explain to them to use the legs properly and to use the seat?
The legs. Okay. In fact, the horse should respect the touch of your legs, and it can't be against. So sometimes you have to give some lesson, a leg lesson and sometimes you should be a bit stronger, because when you touch, you need to feel that something happened immediately from behind, and you will control what's happened. But the problem is also that the riders, they are pushing with their legs. Push the horse, push with your seat, use your legs, but push with your legs, and they squeeze their legs. No, it's something very important. Okay, I can show you that you need to have very supple ankles, because very often other rider put the foot up like that, and he squeeze and he put up.
Yes,
that's one thing. The other thing is sometimes they do this and they stay against. That's not good. In fact, if you have supple ankles, you do this. You just do that. Up, and you come back. I turn my heel to the horse,
and that's it.
And it's quick, and I come back. And if I need quick, but my thighs are soft. My calves are. On nearly always, I feel the horse through my calf. So, okay, I'm doing this, and I come back. That's the horse, okay? That's the horse. Okay, like this. Okay, if I need, I do this, and I come back. But I still have the horse very near the calves are very near the body of the horse. So I do this and I come back. But for that, the horse need to respond, need to be responsive to your legs. So it's up to you. Before, sometimes we need to make the horse more sensitive to your legs. So sometimes use the stick in the same time that you use. That's the most important thing, is to have a horse who is responsive to your legs. But he has to respond. You touch it and you feel that the horse, the response is, yes, 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 I'm coming with you, with my legs. I'm there, with the hindquarters, I'm there.
And how would you use the legs, for example, if you have more of a lazy horse? Do you tap them in the rhythm of the movement or out of the rhythm of the movement?
That depends. We say the horse keep the legs keep the horse awake. So if you touch in the tempo, you rock the horse and the horse will fall asleep. For instance, you make a legil, you move the horse. Okay. If you ask, the horse is not very responsive, and you touch, the horse will fall asleep because it's in its tempo. What I'm doing is, okay, my seat keep the tempo, but if I need, I say during the legil, I say come. So it's bam, 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 bam in another tempo, but so the horse has to move the inside hindquarter, but I keep the tempo with my seat. The independence of edge.
And what about a horse that's, say, over-energetic? Then how would you use
if I make a legil, for instance, I will more control with my outside leg and outside rein. So it means that when the outside hindquarter will be on the ground, I will make like a half fault on the outside rein. And I will be sure that in the legil, for instance, my seat will go forward and not laterally. That's because the leg of the rider begins here. I don't know.
At the hip.
Yes, there is the hip. The hip is to go forward, and the leg is to give the impulsion or to go laterally. Here we need to practice. Okay, I explain like that. But if a rider, if I see the rider the horse is rushing, I say ask less, but with soft leg. Ask less and be sure to control the outside part of the horse. It depends. When you go laterally, it's that. When you go forward, it's both legs together. But you could always use the outside rein to bring the horse more on the outside hindquarter. So you need to make the half fault when the outside hindquarters is on the ground.
Okay, so now we're coming to the half fault. I think we can come now to the hands, which I'm very excited about, because this time we have a bridle here, so we can demonstrate.
Yeah, we can find a bridle, but it's okay.
So I wanted to ask you how you use the hands.
Okay, so first of all, when I need to take the reins, that's to show, but normally I take like this and I do this. Okay, so immediately my elbows coming near the body, and I have a contact. The contact, if the horse is giving the contact with the engagement of the hindquarters, going through all the back and going from the withers to the pole. And in a good balance, you feel that the horse, the highest spot is the top. Is the first
the pole.
Yes. Okay. The pole. Yeah. Okay. The pole. Okay. But could be like this. Could be like that. It depends how the horse is built.
So with more rounded neck or a longer neck, shorter, longer
Okay,
neck.
if I have a long neck, a long body, a long back, I will ask first of all, I will try that the horse extend the neck and still at the pole, carry by himself at the pole. It depends. It's always that depends the physique of the horse. Okay, but okay, he's coming. He's giving you the contact. So I have the contact. But if the horse is pulling, what I'm doing this, I will. The little fingers are very important because look, what I'm doing is that.
I think this is so interesting for people who are just listening.
Now,
She's using the pinky finger
yes.
just a tiny bit on the rein.
You take the reins by those fingers, and you have still three fingers to play. But those one is very important because look, when you play, you play with the finger. Your wrist stay supple, so you don't have any stiffness in your forehand. Neither in your arm, neither in the shoulders, so you stay straight. So, and when you take, we say take and give. Okay, when somebody say to you, close your finger. Close the finger, it means that you need to open to close. You see? But I have the same contact. I do this.
So are you saying you actually give a tiny bit first and then you take?
You take.
To close?
Yeah, I take. And I take again, but to take, I need to open without losing the contact. And it's the same, when people say, open your fingers, open your fingers, not to lose. Open your fingers, it means that you need to have, from the contact, you open, you come back, you open, you come back. It's the same. Or you open, or you need to close to open, and you need to open to close. But open, it's to come back immediately what you need to do. So you feel, and you need that, and it's in fact, you play with the snaffle, in the mouth, but you don't pull the snaffle in the mouth. Mm-hmm. So you play, you understand?
Yes.
That's the difference.
Say for people watching, it's very, very delicate what you're doing, but I can feel it very, very good actually. Like you really are hardly using the reins, but it's very obvious when you do something on the reins. So you can actually influence the horse with very, very delicate movements.
That's important how you take the rein. When you do this, it's something which happens.
So sometimes you also talk about using your fingers like playing a flute.
Yes, well, it's exactly that. You take the flute, and you need to create the flute. If you close too much your fingers on the flute, you can't play.
Exactly.
And if you open, you lose the flute.
I think most riders, they learn in the beginning, to close your hands, so there's no space.
When you see the top riders, they are riding like that. And when they do something, they do like that. And they keep their hands like that, and you pull a little bit, and they do this. And they don't lose. Mm-hmm. And they're like that. And the horse is like that. And after we see that they open, that the tongue is blue and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. With the fingers completely closed.
Yeah,
in the fist.
You need to you need to use, that's as you play piano, or I use very often piano. And after I say, there is something which is better for me to explain is the flute. You have the flute, sing, you have the flute. You need to keep the flute. And you keep and you play, you keep, you play, you keep. It's exactly that.
So let's think of a few examples. If you're going to give a flexion to a horse, how do you give the flexion with the rein?
First of all, okay, I don't have, if I need to flexion, I will fix my inside leg, and I will do this. I will open a little bit, if I need to flexion, I need to build something here. a little bit more to the outside, to the inside rein, but I never will lose completely the outside.
So you sort of turn your wrist a little bit to the inside.
I will turn that. I don't know,
and bring it a little
you are
bit
not
to the
the head
inside.
of the horse. So it's difficult to, but if you do, the horse will do this, okay? And you can say, hey, go, go, go. And this one, perhaps you don't lose your elbow, you don't use the outside elbow, and you build something with this, and you control with that one. Because when you make a flexion, you need to control the outside shoulder blade. Depends, because there is flexion that you are in front, you keep the horse like this in front of you, and you ask a flexion. The moment you see there is obstruction, you wait.
Which is a bit of stiffness that you see.
Stiffness, you wait until the horse is giving up.
Do you vibrate the rein during that time, or you just hold?
Some it depends, but sometimes I don't pull, but I keep. Because if I play, the horse will lose. If I resist without pulling, the horse, at a certain moment, it could feel a little bit uncomfortable and will begin to
chew a little bit.
Chew. The moment he chew, you can ask a little bit more, but keeping the frame of the head straight.
And what if, for example, you have a horse that then starts to lean a little bit on the rein? Then how do you use your hands?
Immediately when the horse begins to lean, I need to feel that. That's very important. That's why the length of the reins are very important. I say the reins are long enough to let the horse using all the neck to come to give you the snaffle, to come to the contact. But we say short enough in order not to let him go through the contact and to fall down on the shoulders. That's a question, very important too. Because if the reins are too long, soft, it doesn't mean that loose. If they are too long, if the horse begin to, you won't feel. That's why the contact should be the contact, the real contact. So when you feel, immediately, when I'm doing this, but look, I'm doing this.
Can you explain what you're doing for people who are listening?
I'm doing this because with supple, I can bring a little bit higher.
So you're sort of lifting from the bottom.
Like that. I don't pull. I put the hands a little bit higher thanks the suppleness of my wrist.
And you're giving
and immediately I need to help with my seat and envelope with my legs, because I need to use. I need always always. If I feel that I can't bring the horse under the saddle only with my bascule, I close my legs a little bit to help that, and altogether I do this. Come on there, and I'm sure that I'm straight, that I'm not sitting like that,
not forward,
not like that. I still my spine going up, but my shoulders are going down. Okay, and it's something.
And you sort of pick them up a bit with the reins,
a little bit,
but just
like this.
It's almost just with the fingers.
Contact. And if I need, I keep like that, and I say, "Hey, come, come, come." If you'll be lazy and losing the impulsion, I will touch with my legs. I will ask through my body, and I will receive on my fingers, and I decided a little bit what to do. But always, when you put the hands up, it's not to pull; it just bring. And when you put higher, it's still softer. If you go high, you can ride. We can ride with very soft hands, a contact of 1 gram on your fingers.
So what you're saying, I think, is so interesting to reflect on. Then in competition, wouldn't it be amazing to see this kind of riding in competition again? And you were talking a while ago about, I think, Justin Verboomen, the Belgian rider.
Yeah, but okay, he's like that. He's soft. You can see anything. Believe me, sometimes he's doing. But look at his hands. Though even you don't you look make the difference between his hands and another rider.
Yeah,
there is completely different. He's not like that. He's sitting, shoulders are dropping down. He's relaxed. He's not like that. You can't feel that he's using his forearm. Nothing. Something. He's really. The horse is stay always on the snaffle. He's never behind. No, and I think that's. But I hope that the rider will understand. But the problem is the rider, as they are the usual rider in the top competition. I don't think that they will change something because they believe in themselves. The most difficult is to train the top dressage riders.
Maybe I'm too optimistic, but I feel like seeing Justin be so successful in the last year, in 2025, I think people have really noticed that there's something different about the way that he rides, and they usually say that he rides very beautifully and so on. What I think is super interesting is that he actually trained with a classical rider for many, many years. Mm-hmm. His trainer was a student of Nuno as well. And at least you can see this difference in the way that he uses the aids with a lot more lightness, in my opinion, than a lot of his other competitors.
That's for sure. Yeah.
And at least I'm, optimistic, but maybe too optimistic. But I really think that this is sort of a special point now when people have been so critical of especially dressage riding, and not only the treatment of the horses, but the movements that you see in dressage that get high points, which don't necessarily follow classical principles of a correct movement.
You're right. You're completely right. But really, I hope that it will open some gates to people to realize that you can go in competition and still be unit with your horse, and the horse is happy. I remember that when he won. I don't know. I think it was when he was champion from Europe. There was a lot of noise, everything, and the horse was standing quiet. He didn't move. There was champagne, and the horse was still there like that. He's really trust where he was, and I think that it's a really big point. But I cross fingers. I would like that. Thanks him, change the things will change in the competition. I hope, and I think yes. But the judges should change also a little bit. I'm really wondering what will happen this time in the World Championship in August in Aachen. I think that everybody will be there. That will be the great meeting to know if something will happen or not, because everybody will be there that time. But it's. I appreciate so much that we in Belgium we have that kind of rider, and really it's like a small miracle because it's something unusual.
Yeah,
and I think it's. I hope, and I think, but I don't think that it will change for the new generation. But for that, the judges should begin already now, when they judge the small competition. Already now, they need to reward the riders who are riding with the same feeling.
Yeah,
and not what we say. For instance, a 5 years old. He can't be collect as a horse of Prince George. They shouldn't let that. They can't. They shouldn't leave the riders riding that way. They need to punish a little bit on the last points. They are by two. They there say no. The horse, you need to improve. You need to improve the lightness. Take the points out from that, and perhaps it will change. But if they don't change the young riders, it should begin by that also.
It's easier to start in the beginning for sure.
Yeah. That's, I think.
So you trained with Nuno Oliveira for a long time.
Yeah.
How do you think that training with him really changed your perspective on riding?
Because when I met him, I saw him the first time. He was giving a clinic somewhere in Belgium, and I went to see him, and I saw there's something else, like a ballet. Well, because he was riding, and when he gave a lesson, it was something very, very soft. And I was coming from a jumping rider, because I was jumping before, and he opened my eyes with a lot of things. He opened my eyes about that. Why do you want to ask more than the horse can give you? There is things that you can train the horse to be a partner, and not somebody that you want to. I am the master. You have to do what I want. So it was completely different. The respect of the horse, the lightness of his heads, and because when I was training for dressage, we need to. That's the old fashion, but it was we need to keep the knees against the saddle, and we have to keep even on that time money between the all those things.
I've done that.
And it was something different, and it was so peaceful that I remember I said, oh, Jesus, that's something else. And the people who was training at that time, they was really quiet people, soft. There was another atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so after that, I say, oh, I met him. I say, okay, I would like to. I went by myself. I went to say hello. Oh, wonderful! What? Could you come in my place or to my where I was? It was my future parents-in-law. So I said, could you come? I said, immediately he said, yes, when you want. Oh, as soon as possible. And that's the way I began. And he came the day after, because yes, one free day. And he came, and we organized quickly like that the first lesson with people who has nothing to do with dressage. We tried it. We thought that we made dressage, but in fact, we didn't make anything for dressage. We just like everybody, in fact.
And what do you think are some of the lessons that you learned about dressage, or real dressage, I guess is what you're saying, with him that really stuck in your mind? If you hear him in your mind saying some things.
Less hands. Don't pull on reins. I remember that. Sit. But in fact, I'll say frankly, the moment I sit really. I know, because it was he said to me, oh, but yeah, you are not bad sit at all, because I relaxed myself. And the straightness, please, the straightness of a horse. He say, don't bend the neck, bend the horse, but don't bend the neck. What about the outside rein? The straightness was on the circle. Jesus, that was really difficult. Because when you are on a horse, we want to turn. And in fact, when you turn, we turn already with the body inside, and we pull more, and we look when we look where we need to go. But when you begin to make a circle, we turn already the head there. No, we need to go to that to reach that. And as I told you, it's the meaning of the horse straight on the circle. In fact, you build with the horse, you build the arc, and you push that arc forward. And you make the circle. But also, with competition, it's sometimes it's easier. But when we work, even we need to think of the geometry, because very often we begin to make a circle and we turn immediately like that. Instead of going half, just half hemisphere, yes, it's one part after the equator and after the same. And we don't, when you begin, you make this, we don't go enough forward. Mm-hmm. And because we are doing this, we don't have the horse already he's not on the arc of the circle, things like that. But how many times he spent to make a straight horse on the circle? And hands, always hands. And he's always say, I remember he said, take the back of the horse, don't take his mouth. That's what else. Very often I use that, stay in the middle of the horse. That's always the ears between your head between the two ears. Sternum in front of the crest. Same weight on both foot, on the stirrups. Things like that. And in fact, it's the basic things. The basic. And to spend time to see him riding, you just see, you don't try to see what he is doing because you don't see anything. People who say that they see what he is doing, it's not true. Because he was so quick, he touched it's already, and the whole, he interfere always, but he interfere early enough. So the moment he feels that something could happen, immediately he's doing. So nothing happened.
He does it before.
The horse going on in the exercise.
Yeah.
That was fabulous. But
Amazing.
It's, for me, as I told you, it's difficult to speak about because he gave me a lot. He gave me a lot. And I have so nice feeling, so nice memories that I would like to transfer that. That's because I was I have to say I was so happy that I want to see that happiness to the rider, the same smile after the lesson or something. That's so grateful.
So after all of your experience now in teaching for so long, what would you say you wish more riders knew based on what you learned in all of your experience?
I will say, please come back to the basic things. If you want to improve your horse, don't improve them making exactly all time same exercise. Come back to the basic things and you will improve. Because you will, sometimes, for example, pirouette is too big. Okay, and the riders try to make shorter and shorter. No, there is other things to do before that to have the horse in a better collection, using more the outside edge and then come back and don't try to make immediately. Try to share your pirouette. 1 step, 2 step, go forward. Sit the horse again. 1, 2 steps. They are too in hurry. Please, the riders, come back to the basic things.
I think it's such a good point. There's usually this interesting saying that goes, the beginner riders want to do advanced movements and advanced riders want to do beginner movements, because it's really in mastering the basics that you are able to do the advanced movement as well.
Of course, at the basement. Okay, when you build a house, you put the basement enough. It won't be the same basement if it's a house, or if it's a building of five or I don't know stages. I don't know. So that's the basic thing is, and it's not to go back. It's to improve, and that's the mentality of the rider.
So for riders who are interested in either starting in classical dressage or even just riding, no matter what discipline they are, according to classical principles, what would you recommend for them to just start? To start with some basic things, if it's a book or an exercise or...
Always basic, straight horse. Bring to the court. You need to have to, that's important to build on the hindquarters, the impulsion, the direction, and the balance. You need to have those, and you need to possess. You need to possess the quarters to do what you want with the forehand. So possess the quarters. That's if you have the straight. You give the direction. Okay, when you give the direction, in the same time you need to keep the balance. Because if you use more legs to build, you need to have the balance with your position and everything. Okay, impulsion, but balance. And it's impulsion, direction, and balance. 3 things. And always, when you work, try to fix the equilibrium between the balance and the impulsion.
Something we all aspire to and we're working towards. It's been so inspirational talking with you. So
thank you. I try to explain my feeling, but I'm really happy to meet you. That's my pleasure. And who knows, perhaps somebody will think about that, the basement, the basic things.
I hope so. And honestly, it's a pleasure to meet you as well. And I love that you really bring so much passion, and even after such a long time, so much energy to the work that you do, especially when you're teaching. And I really appreciate that you've stayed true to the principles of Nuno, and you've tried really hard to pass those on, and have worked very hard for a very long time. And I think that's been such a gift for riders today. So thank you so much for the work that you do, and especially for sharing with everyone on the podcast today.
Thank you. And I hope to see you one day. And if you come for any reason, I will try to find a horse to spend together 1 hour on the horse. I will try. It depends when but if you come in Belgium, perhaps I can find a horse for you, just to spend together some moment.
Well, I wish this opportunity for everyone, and I would be really honored. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Give you a hug. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.